Okay, very good. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. We just took a quick break between the open finance meeting that we just closed. We're now moving into our regular business meeting. I had already read the open public meeting statement, so if you missed it, you can watch the video. Where we left off is on roll call. We didn't have the full complement, so Tatiana, would you mind doing a roll call now?
Mr. Arna?
Present.
Mr. Corelli?
Here.
Ms. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Connors? Ms. Cronin? Ms. Kenny?
Here.
Mr. Valenti?
Here.
Ms. Weber?
Yes,
Mr. Gilfillan?
playing hooky. Thank you. If you're able, would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I don't have any initial president's comments. If I do, I'll put them in during the public commentary session or right before. So to get right to it, I'm going to move over to the administrative reports. Dr. LaSousa, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Sure, I don't have too much beyond the budget presentation. A special commendation to our robotics team at the high school, who was in Scranton this whole weekend competing on a national level, and they represented us well, and we'll hope to have them at a upcoming meeting because they've made great progress over the past year or two. The spring musical is taking place at the high school this week, so if anyone is able to come on Thursday night or Friday night or Saturday night, it should be a great show. It's the Addams Family, and I know that the very, very early initial reviews are good. And then we continue to monitor enrollment. We're still slightly below where we were last year with respect to kindergarten, and we're keeping a close eye on that, especially as it relates to the programs that we have in place at all three K-3 buildings, because Southern continues to gain students and Milton and Washington continue to lose some students. That's my report.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. LaSousa? No, not yet. Okay, moving on to business administrator's report.
The only item to mention is the security costs as a result of the curriculum concerns at the middle school. The total expenses amounted to approximately $6,800. Chatham Township billed the district $80 an hour for 8 hours per day for 3 days, plus the board meeting coverage of $580 for a total of $2,500. Chatham Borough billed the district at $100 per hour for 8 hours a day for 5 days, plus the cost of an armed police vehicle at the site for $300 for a total of approximately $4,300 billed for their services.
So the borough was 4,200 and the township was, this is just to catch everybody up. At the last meeting, a resident, Mr. Higgins, Bob Higgins, had requested that the board look into how much the district had to pay for additional police presence. And again, the additional police presence was due directly to the false statements made on national television, which then got middle America all riled up and sending threatening, violent, vulgar, either messages, packages, emails, voicemails. So we needed some additional police presence at both the the central office here, as well as at the middle school. The main concern was having 900 students arrive on campus at 7:30 in the morning on Monday after all this had happened. And there had been considerable press on it, so we wanted to ensure the safety of the students and, of course, the staff as well. So it was required to have additional police presence at these two locations. For, again, this was Mr. Higgins. I'll email him so he has the total. So Tatiana, $6,800 in total. Maybe we can follow up on the police vehicle. I'll talk to Rich about that as the borough liaison, but, and that comes right out of our operating budget. So $6,800 would have paid for the sailing club. $6,800 would have paid for the paddle team for an annual budget. $6,800 could have been used to pay for books. Instead, we paid for police presence to react to, again, false statements, and then we had no choice. The safety of the students will always come first. All right, thank you, Tatiana. I'll talk to Mr. Connors. The only thing I have a question on is the police vehicle. But again, we requested this, and you know, I know folks, some thought, oh gosh, the borough will pick that up, the township will pick that up. They don't have fluid budgets. Their budgets are set just like ours is. They can't, you know, so just when Kings or a private industry asks for additional security guard, they have to pay for it. So this is not a slight on either the township or the borough police departments. They have budgets to keep. They don't have manpower sitting around. They had to bring somebody in off-duty, and that's the rate. So be it. That's where we're at. Infuriating. Okay, well, thank you. Tatiana, did you have any additional comments?
That's the only item to mention today.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And you received invoices, correct? Written invoices on those itemized invoices? Alrighty. Rich might be calling you to get a copy of those.
They're absolutely relevant.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I will get back to Mr. Higgins, who's the gentleman that asked the question. I will give him the totals of those. Does anybody else have any questions for Tatiana on the business side? No? Okay. Moving on. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to committee reports. Ms. Ciccarelli for personnel.
Yes, we met on Wednesday, March 8th, and we discussed the RICE requirements, briefly discussed staffing, and we got a brief overview from Ms. Grant according to code of the non-renewals. And we are meeting again, yeah, April 3rd.
April 3rd? Is that a block or is that fluid because we have other meetings that we might be scheduled? Or is April 6th the,
April 5th is the date
Other
we'll
meeting.
discuss in executive session.
Okay.
But April 3rd is
still on?
still on.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Any additional questions for Ann or Ms. Grant on personnel? Seeing none. Moving on to curriculum, Ms. Clark?
Curriculum met on March 8th. We discussed the restructuring of the ACE program. In addition, we got an update on the first full year implementation of the teacher evaluation program that the district initially piloted, which 64 teachers have participated in. It's in the second year, and the teachers participate in, they videotape themselves teaching, they reflect on their videos, gain feedback. It's been very, very positively received by the administrators, by the teachers, and hopefully it's something that more of our teachers will participate in going forward, and something that we can look at, as a district to help improve instruction across the board. And that's it.
That's it. Excellent. Any questions for Ms. Clark or Ms. Chase? Okay, seeing none. Finance and facilities. Mr. Gilfillan is traveling again, so I'll just quickly do his report. We met briefly before this to talk about a few items, including the open finance meeting that we just had. We talked about the special services building update. We received and reviewed some initial estimates from the architect. We also talked about the Kruger Field project. That had to go back out to bid for a second time. The first bid came in too high, so we bundled more of the projects together in hopes of getting some economy of scale, so that had to go back out for bid. We should expect those back in a couple weeks? Hey,
They close March 29th.
March 29th, thank you. And hopefully they'll come in significantly lower. We talked about funding clubs, which I just talked about. We can't fund the sailing club or the paddle club. They're both about $5,000 to $6,000. Again, unfortunately, we just spent $68 on police protection. That was unnecessary. But we'll look to see if we can fund those if any funding becomes available. And the pecking order is sailing has been in existence longer, and then paddle thereafter. And Sal, to your point earlier, if we can't fund the whole thing, maybe we can look to offset some of the cost for it. And that was it. And then we went right into the finance meeting, which was part of the open finance session. Any questions on any finance and facilities? No. Seeing none, moving over to policy and planning. Mr. Connors, has policy met at all?
No, we have not met since our last meeting.
Okay, good report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Oh, very good.
Team policy.
Moving on to liaison reports, jumping right in again, Mr. Connors.
Well, I'm glad I showed up.
Really?
Nothing to report from the borough.
Imagine how we've been stalling though till you walked in the door. Nothing to report. Mr. Connors, if you could, Tatiana gave us a report on the, Mr. Higgins, if you recall, had asked a question about the funding for how much was spent on police protection. We got that. I was hoping you could look at the borough, particularly invoices, and maybe we can have a conversation. They parked a police vehicle, which again, we incurred these expenses. We authorized these expenses, no question about the expenses. I just wanted to talk to you maybe about the police vehicle, and maybe you can talk to your liaison in the borough.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You're all caught up now.
Apparently I do have something to report on the borough,
Next week,
but we'll
next
talk
time.
about it next time.
Ms. Clark in the township?
Nothing to report from the township as it relates to the schools.
Athletic boosters, back to you, Mr. Connors. Man,
Unfortunately, they did meet, but I was work commitment. I could not attend the last meeting. I
okay,
apologize
neither
for
did
that.
I, yeah, sorry about that. Well, that's all right. We're going to move over to the performing arts, and Sal's going to wow us.
I'll give you a quick update. Chatham Voices had the pleasure of performing at the high school fashion show Friday, March 10th, to honor Jennifer Cosgrove, who has run that event for 14 years, and it was her last year running the event, so Chatham Voices did a marvelous job at that event, and we wanted to just give them a shout out. We also want to congratulate the Chatham Middle School cellist Stephen Andrews, who's been accepted into the All-State Junior Orchestra, and Stephen will perform at Summit High School on May 13th, so he deserves a special mention and a shout out. As Dr. L'Souza mentioned earlier, this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we're all going to attend to watch a love story about a girl named Wednesday. And this is the Addams Family musical that is being put on at the high school. First day Thursday, second day Friday, and the last day, finale is Saturday. I do want to mention that on the Thursday evening show, post-show, the theater department does a wonderful job on putting on a dinner for the seniors to include them into the community and draw them in, and it's always a great success, and it's very appreciated. So that is going to follow Thursday's performance as well, or
That's great.
precede it. And then finally, I just want to let everyone know that the next meeting of the Chatham Performing Arts Boosters is Wednesday, April 5th at 7 p.m. at the Lafayette Faculty Room. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I know that's always a hot item, the dinner for the seniors, and the students love serving it. And
I've attended. It's really a wonderful event. It's warming.
Yeah, it's a great tradition. Thank you, Sal. Moving over to Chatham Education Foundation, Ms. Kenny?
Yes, I just wanted to remind everyone that their annual fundraiser, which is going to be a casino night, is going to be held on April 21st at Fairmount Country Club. Tickets are $100, and tickets purchased by March 31st will include $50 in chips towards the gaming events. The event will feature games and a silent auction and wine and beer tastings, and a scotch tasting as well.
Wow,
So,
Rich.
I see a challenge.
We'll have an executive policy meeting. Policy committee will be, and I'm sorry, April 21st?
April
Yes,
21st at Fairmont.
And they'll have gaming tables, craps, blackjack?
I don't know which, do you know, Pam, by any chance? It's going to be a casino night, so I'm
Yeah.
assuming that they're having
Oh, that's
the
fun.
standard.
Excellent, that'll be a lot of fun. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Lotta?
No, that's it.
Mr. Recreation, Mr. Gilfillan's not here, and Kim is not here for PTO District Cabinet has not met since in the last 2 weeks, have they, Mike?
In the last 2 weeks, no.
Well, we had a meeting.
I'm just trying to think back to the date we met.
No, okay. Okay, very
Say
good.
one thing about PTO, because back to the fashion show. With Jen Cosgrove stepping aside, they did say at the fashion show when they thanked her that she with her at the helm of the fashion show, it's raised over $750,000 for the school.
Wow.
So I think that's,
We
she
raised
has done.
$75,000 this year alone.
Yeah, it's just an amazing, amazing endeavor that she and her team put together each year to bring people together, and she will be sorely missed.
Wow.
You're here?
Thank God she had 5, 6 kids.
$750,000.
She's been a terrific contributor to
Oh,
the
yeah.
high school and the school district.
every school
and
she's been in.
it's-
Yeah, so.
Couldn't
She is-
say enough.
Active participant on the boosters, athletic boosters. Yeah,
Yep.
she's
Every,
definitely part of the 80-90.
Yep. yeah, really. Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. That was a nice call out. Seeing no additional questions, we still do not have the Magic 5 for the December 19th, so we're not going to pass those. So, I know, it's unbelievable. It's,
Is there a, if I may, is
Sure.
there a statute of limitations? by
I
which
asked
we
that,
have
and
to-
Peter said no. Can go on forever.
Apparently we won't.
So I make a motion to pass the minutes of March 6th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do you know who has to abstain?
I think they're not here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Then they're abstaining. Okay, very good. So we move on to our first opportunity for public commentary. We only have the one mic over here. If you could just introduce yourself. It doesn't look like we have a big crush of people like we did last time, so just, monitor your own time. Just be cognizant of if a line forms behind you. And as always, please be respectful as the speaker is speaking. As Mr. Connor says, please don't chirp out. If you have something to say, please just come up to the mic and say it, and we'll happy and graciously listen to each and every speaker. But just if I can, my usual spiel, I apologize. I paused for a second as if I was almost done. This is your opportunity to make a public commentary. It's your opportunity to, tell us about issues or compliments, or Amy Coates often comes with a check, which is nice of her. But it's not an opportunity. We don't really have time to do a lengthy back and forth. If it's a quick yes or no question, we try and answer it. But if it's going to take more time than that, we may have to schedule off time with the appropriate person. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Pam Polomeni, Chatham Township. In the Open Finance Committee meeting, one of the items that has been taken, or is looking to be taken out of the budget, is the part-time clerical staff aides at the libraries for K-3. As a parent who has volunteered at the SBS library for the last 12 years and seen firsthand what these part-time paraprofessionals do, I think it would be a big shame if they were removed from the libraries. Parents are there, they shelve, they check kids in, books in and out, but those professionals are constantly doing something, whether it's repairing books, putting new books into circulation, taking old books out of circulation, helping kids find books, check books in and out when there's not parents there, when Mr. DeLoya is leading a class, and if, amongst many, many other things that they do with the programs that the libraries do hold. And if they were not there, my fear would be that those kids would not be allowed to come into the library unless it's their scheduled time to be in the library, only because Mr. DeLoy cannot be leaving his class to go check kids in and out. And parents, although, yes, they are there, numerous, it's becoming more and more difficult to staff the library during those times. And they've become very creative in how the volunteers are there, and they're only there usually during a class period time. So outside of those times, it becomes very difficult, and those paraprofessionals are very, very valuable. So I would hope that you would consider taking that out of the budget. And one other quick comment is, why can't we go to the max of 3.2%? If it means that we can add those additional, or some of the additional teachers that they need at the high school that desperately need, that we can, keep those part-time paraprofessionals in the library. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional public commentary? There's also an opportunity at the end for those that are not familiar. We then go through the regular agenda, and then if something sparks your interest, there's another opportunity at the end for public commentary.
And if this is your first time here, you have to come up and say something. I'm looking at you three right
I will just mention, as Ms. Devlin is writing down her name, that I appreciate Ms. Polomeni's comments, and of course, a lot of those staff members that we have working in our media centers are valued, and we would most likely, we would be reassigning them to other positions where we can continue to draw on their expertise and their contributions to the district. But the 3.2%, one of the downsides to going up to 3.2%, and of course, if the board chooses to do that, it can, is that it would take off the table any of the banked cap. Whereas at the current number, there still is close to $200,000 of banked cap in case we have another problem next year. So it's a little bit less conservative, a little bit more risk to go all the way up to the max and not leave anything in the quote-unquote bank in case we have, problems next year.
Right. And as a board, we have to weigh out, all the residents' concerns. And I'm looking to Mr. Heap, and, he reminds us of our fiscal responsibility. So we try to be very cognizant, and that's why we have one of the lowest spending. And gosh, we don't want to cut it. We certainly don't want to, but we need to find where the least impact to the most students. And I'm sure it's of great value. I certainly wouldn't want to think the district has been paying for a service that has been of no value. So unfortunately, we're at the point where we're cutting into bone now. And so I definitely appreciate your comments. Thank you for making them. So it's unfortunate, but we're at a position where we need to cut. If we can start adding things back in, though, let's say funding becomes available, there's additional retirements that we didn't know about where there's some breakage. So there's still some movement. So not all hope is lost, but we certainly don't want to paint a rosy picture and not say things have to be cut, because they do. Sorry to call you out, Mr. Heap.
And by the way, that has happened in the past where a preliminary, something happened and then.
We appreciate it.
I talked to them when they moved them from full-time to part-time
Right.
years and years ago. I felt I needed to.
But we need to hear both sides. We need to hear, the conscious, citizens, and as well as the folks that are maybe in the trenches and what. So we need to hear both sides. So apologize, Aunt Jane.
No. Okay. Well,
Jane Devlin, Tatham Township.
yes, Jane Devlin, Chatham
Jane's
Township.
a regular.
I'm actually going to get up twice tonight,
All right.
but I'm going to start by talking about the Chatham High School robotics team. This past weekend, they went to the Super Regionals in Pennsylvania, a very high level of competition. And the students were amongst the highly advanced, top-seeded teams. Many of the teams, the majority of the teams they were competing against were in effect for years, some as old as 10 years. Other teams they were up against were already competing in the world level of robotics. And they were competing with students from all over this region area, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New York, etc., Connecticut. Our team kind of held their own. We performed in the middle ground. We won some, we lost some. In the end, rather predictably, the top-seeded teams went away with the awards and are going to the world competition. But I do want to say our students had a very successful learning experience. They came away with knowledge that they were already on the bus home talking about putting into action how they could further grow as individual students in STEM and as a team, how they could advance. They not only met peers from all over of some of the states I mentioned to you, but they met others pursuing STEM studies. They saw sponsors and mentors in the field of STEM. And more than once, very truly I say this, they mentioned feeling supported by the district and that their pursuit and love of science, technology, and math was being recognized and validated by the teachers at the high school, by the administrators, and the Board of Ed. And they mentioned all three of those divisions. And these students' behaviors the entire weekend was impeccable, including during the free time they had, some of the socials. They maintained decorum. They did nothing disruptive. They were gracious, polite, and as well they showed good sportsmanship. And unlike some other rookie teams there, they were not sore losers or negative. They acted with dignity and respect and showed resiliency when things were going their way and when things were not going their way. I have been in the past year to general meets, which are qualifiers, and the regionals, where they did outstanding. And each level of these matches gets more intense and demanding academically. This Chatham High School teams came so far this season, both teams, particularly / Cougars. But the level of competition and academic vigors at this level this weekend was hard to explain. You almost had to be there to really experience it. Yet our team didn't fold under the demands or the pressures. I can only envision them as a team setting further goals for themselves next season thanks to this enriching experience they had this weekend based on their achievements and because of the district's support of STEM in our schools and support of this trip in particular. And in closing, I also want to mention the dedication of the teacher, Miss Ryan. She struck a balance of being a teacher, pursuing the academics all weekend, a coach, keeping morale and spirits up, and a chaperone, ensuring each student's safety and well-being. And she was a role model the entire weekend for the students. Thank you. I brought a program. I should have thought of bringing everyone a program next time, but I'm
Okay.
going to give this to Dr.
Oh,
Lasisa.
perfect, thank you. Thank you, Jane. Nice
Thank you.
shout out to the robotics and Miss Ryan.
Thank you.
If there's no additional public commentary the first round, again, you have another opportunity at the end. We're going to go through the agenda. And again, just to, if it seems like we're going through it quickly, I'd just like to say, these get posted on Friday afternoon, late afternoon, maybe 4 o'clock. So they're out there, we can review them over the weekend and bring any questions that we have. So moving right along into the action items, Ms. Ciccarelli, would you mind moving personnel items first?
I would not. I'd like to move agenda items A1 to A12 on our regular agenda.
Second.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Grant or Dr. Lasousa on any of the personnel items?
Just wishing Ms. Repshaw happy retirement.
I know, I get jealous every time I see that. Good for her. Good for her, good for her. Any additional questions or comments? Nope, seeing none. Tatiana, would you mind doing a roll call vote?
Mr. Arna?
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes. Thank you very much. Moving on to finance and facilities, I'm going to fill in for Mr. Gilfillan. I would like to move items B1 through B9.
Second.
Mr. Connor second, and there's no addendum. Thank you. Give me 1 second. Oh, thank you. We have a couple of donations to call out. Chatham Middle School PTO donation of $5,500, almost $5,600 for tables with benches valued at almost $5,600 to be used as for the sunshade structure. And also the Chatham Athletic Boosters donation of $4,000 to be used for videotaping of the boys and girls soccer team for, I think it says spring season, but it must be in fall, because we don't have a spring.
Or is it lacrosse
Or is
spring
that
season?
supposed to be lacrosse?
Oh, it's either soccer fall or spring lacrosse.
I'm guessing it would be the lacrosse, because that's how they would have done it
Yeah,
in
it
the
would
last
come
boosters
through.
meeting.
Okay.
And had I attended, I'd be able to clarify that.
Yeah, we should verify.
Jill,
So-
can I add something real quick?
Oh, certainly.
I should have mentioned this during the Performing Arts Boosters, and I don't know if it's appropriate here, but I should point out that the Chatham Education Association sponsors that dinner for the seniors
Oh.
that gets done on the night of the rehearsal dinner, the first night of the play.
Oh, very
So
nice.
that takes place because of the Chatham Education.
Education.
All right, thank you,
Foundation.
sorry.
Excellent. Another great donation. Thank you, Sal. So can we amend 9? Okay. So switch it, it's going to be lacrosse, so just switch soccer to lacrosse, and we're going to leave the spring season. Any additional questions or comments about finance and facilities? Nope, seeing none, if you would.
Agenda items B1 through B9. Mr. Arna?
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes. Thank you very much. Moving on to curriculum, Ms. Clark, would you mind?
I move action item C1 for vote.
Second.
C1, really working hard.
Because where's my friend?
I'm assuming nobody has questions, because you couldn't ask them in public session anyway,
Yes.
so we'll move on. If you would-
Agenda item C1. Mr. Arna?
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes. Thank you very much. Moving on to policy, Mr. Connors.
I move D1.
Second.
Excellent. And this is our second and final reading for the modifications to the school visitor program, visitor policy, I'm sorry.
Is that a yes, Mike?
Yes, second and final?
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Does anybody have any questions? Will that be posted shortly after the meeting?
Should be posted tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Any additional questions for Mr. Connors? He kind of spearheaded that for us. Thank you again, Rich. If you wouldn't mind, Tatiana?
Agenda item D1, Mr. Arnott,
Yes.
Ms. Chickrelli,
Yes.
Ms. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Connors,
Yes.
Ms. Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Valenti,
Yes.
Ms. Weber.
Yes. Excellent, thank you. We do have our second opportunity for public commentary. I just want to remind the board before we, oh no, I'm sorry, board business, I'm jumping. Do we have any new or additional items for board business? The only item I have is just to keep an eye on any funding that frees up for either, the paraprofessionals, sailing, wherever we can shake the trees for extra money. Let's see where we can backfill some of the items that we had to cut from the operating budget because of the lack of funds. And also, Mike, I know May 1st is the point where we're going to vote on the budget. If money frees up in July, it could be amended, correct? Or no?
If we have unanticipated revenue or we make decisions subsequent to the budget, we can incorporate items that are not there yet. So
Okay.
for example, if we have a teacher that we need because we have more students who move into town, we
Okay.
can hire a teacher. If we want to fund sailing because we make another decision and we're more confident that we have the funds available, we can do
Okay.
that.
So what,
We can't change the tax levy increase.
understood.
So you can work within the numbers.
Right. So as of right now, we're going with the 2.87. We'll discuss it again May 1st, but we still can work within those numbers. Okay. Thank you. Does anybody else have any additional board business they'd like to bring up at this time? Nothing to my left. Gentlemen? You're good? Okay. Just to remind the board, we do have an executive session after this. Action will not be taken. And it will probably be a good 20 minutes to a half hour, I suspect. It's not a 5-minuter. It's a little longer than that, right? Is that a fair
Correct.
assessment, Mike?
Yes.
Okay. I account for 30 minutes. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So we don't have any additional board business. We have our second opportunity for public commentary. If something came to mind, if you wouldn't mind stepping up to the mic, just introducing yourself. No? Nobody's feeling compelled? You're too intimidating, apparently, Ms. Devlin.
Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. I would like to raise awareness and please request that attention be paid to the matter of homework during the April spring break. Whereas I know there is no district-wide policy on homework, and it is known I continue to advocate for just that, I do want to point out that there are now some no homework dates included on the school calendar. I see that as a very positive step. But what I wanted to raise awareness of and ask follow-up on is how some teachers are assigning homework the day before the last day of school prior to the break and making it due the day following the first day back from the break. For example, school ends on a Friday and break is 1 week. No homework is assigned that Friday, but it is given on a Thursday and made due on the Tuesday, 1 day after the return from break. Excuse me. Technically, the teachers haven't assigned homework during a break because they made it due on a Tuesday instead of the Monday return. Yet, the spirit and purpose of a homework-free period is still lost when this is done. Instead of rejuvenating, taking a respite from school on school break, and de-stressing, the students continue to have homework looming over them during break, but it's just due 1 day later. And without a doubt, this has happened more than once. So when this occurs, the focus on wellness is lost. I also think the message to the youth that it is okay, even advisable, to sometimes stop, break, and relax is lost when the teachers are doing what they are doing and not embracing the homework-free time, which, by the way, homework-free time is really not that frequent on the calendar, so it's not inconceivable we shouldn't strive to keep those dates in place. Therefore, I would hope this could be looked into. Further, by teachers assigning homework in this fashion, it seems to say to the students, it's okay to get around, if not policies, then recommendations. And what they see on the school calendar, or even in a principal's letter, is then disingenuine. It's somewhat trickery to say, no homework, but. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Oh, no more public commentary, so we're closing shop. That's it. Gotta go. Hello, Mr. Heat.
Good evening, how are you? Bill Heap, Chatham Borough. I'm here to lay into you about the
I would expect nothing less.
about the new office complex. It's ironic that you're telling everybody that you've got no money. I think the financial case for this complex is pretty thin. It's a pretty straightforward build or buy, build or rent decision.
Build or what?
Build or rent
Rent.
decision, yeah. I think the space available for purchase probably in Chatham is especially suitable to your needs on a turnkey basis is probably pretty limited, but there is a lot of space for rent in town. I called up Caldwell Banker last week and inquired as to what office space was fetching along Main Street and Chatham and Madison. I was told rock bottom, $20 a square foot, probably more like 23 to 25, depending on what you want, and of course, everything is negotiable. It's pretty clear from those figures that you're getting a pretty good discount to market by staying in this facility. The payback, let me just throw out a figure of 4,000 square feet. That would be $100,000 a year plus whatever else is involved, utilities and so forth. Here you're paying $60,000. The payback at the $25 a square foot rate is 25 years. Here it's even further out, it's 35 years. It's just not a good use of our money. There has also been a figure thrown out, a savings figure of $85,000. That really should be qualified if you're going to use that figure. Some amount of that money is going to be taken right off the top to pay for the new, for overhead for the new building. You've got things like light, heat, air conditioning, janitorial services, landscaping, increased insurance, whatever. I'm not sure that anybody's going to really know what the cost is until you build the building. But that $85,000, it'll come right off the top of that. It's also the case that the $60,000 figure doesn't really represent savings. It depends on which hat you have on at the time. If you have your school board hat on, it's $60,000 is your gain. There's no question about that. If you have a Chatham Township taxpayer hat on, they are $60,000 in the hole, and they're going to have to make that up some way. So the accounting on this, because we're self-dealing, is a little bit murky. It's not straightforward. It's not as if you're engaging in an arm's length transaction with a third party where the accounting would be crystal clear. Your gain is somebody else's loss in this case. And I think that when you use that figure, you should qualify it. There is also a case to be made for efficiency. And we all understand that time is money, and we'd all like to have as much convenience in our lives as possible. Last week sometime I drove to the high school parking lot, and I drove out of the parking lot and I drove to the front door of this building. And then I drove back. Would anybody like to venture a guess on the time and mileage? I guess it's 7 minutes each way. I got stopped at the light on Fairmount and Southern Boulevard, and the mileage is about 3 1/4. I would say, Dr. LaSousa, when you're out doing your road work, I'm going to guess that that's a 19, 20-minute run for you, 3 1/4 miles, 6 minutes and change a mile? Yeah, right. 7 minutes? Okay. My point is that that is 7 minutes and 3¼ miles is not a good reason to spend $2.5 million. I think some of the efficiencies can be taken out, inefficiencies can be taken out by some advanced planning. We're never going to be at 100% efficiency, but if you do that planning, I think you can do reasonably well. The last thing I will say is that the taxpayers in town deserve a modicum of respect. The last time we had a big vote, before you took our vote away, it was pretty clear what the message was. In fact, it was crystal clear. The message was, knock off the frivolous spending. This is something where the space here is perfectly suitable. If this is the worst that anybody has to put up with during their tenure here, it's not bad. We give you this money to spend on the kids, not on administrative overhead. So I would really urge you to reconsider that, especially in light of the fact that you are crying poverty at this point. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Thank you, Bill, I appreciate it. Are there any additional public commentary before we move on? No? No additional? Okay, so we're going to close the public commentary, but Bill, I would like to respond, and I think Mr. Connors would as well, but I stand by the 85,000 because it's 60,000 in rent and an additional 35,000 in utilities and fiber optics. 100% of the 60,000 and 100% of the fiber optics will go back to the operating budget. What is a wash is obviously the utilities, lights and whatnot. But 100% of the rent and 100% of the fiber optics that we run up here will go back directly to the operating budget to pay for a teacher or paraprofessional. I also have to comment on, I'm reluctant to go back through my whole dissertation on this, but I'm leaning in that direction. You said the space is sufficient here. We have had substantive conversations for years on this, substantive conversations, and the space is insufficient here. And the township has been as gracious as they can. They have given us what space they have available. We have rented what space they have available to rent. It is insufficient. We have supervisors in converted bathrooms with urinals. We have tech supervisors, and I can't even say the word converted garages, just in garages. So if it were sufficient, we would stay here. It has become insufficient. Unfortunately, the special services building in October, November got to a point where it was no longer inhabitable. So we had to move 5 additional people in here. There was no space. What we did is they converted the conference room here into office space, fine. You know, you do what you have to, you pinch pennies. It's less about the rent, it's more about we need more sufficient professional space. If those that were here during the budget presentation, our enrollment has grown considerably. With that, so has staff and supervisors and unfortunately administrators. When we moved from the borough, in the borough we were paying 0 rent, but rent irrespective, even if the dollar figure were 0 here, it's still insufficient space. We can take that money, put it back into the operating budget. The plan is to create one combined office space for both the central office, some of our text posts, the registrar that we've had to put down there. But we can use to pay for that, we're going to use capital reserve funds. Capital reserve funds cannot be used to fund any operating budget. It cannot be used to fund special education, general education, teachers, no curricular needs. Capital expense can only be used for capital improvements. Conversely, the money that we put back in the operating budget can be used to hire teachers, special education programs, curricular programs. So we are not increasing taxes, and I have to go back to the referendum and the survey question because it's misleading. When we put out the referendum and we put out subsequent survey questions, they were very specific to what would the residents vote to increase taxes for. There was no questions put out there for what would you vote for if it was no increase in taxes. So to say the public spoke loud and clear, you spoke loud and clear on what you did not want an increase in taxes for. So when we put out the most recent referendum, Only things that received 50% approval rate and above were put on that referendum, and then it passed with flying colors. So again, it's a combination of things, the insufficient space, the fact that the special services building, the capital reserve, being able to take advantage of some state grant money, that we believe that this is the best use of the capital funds that we have available to us without increasing taxes. So, I mean, I have a much longer spiel. You can read the February 6th minutes if you want to get the whole version of it, but I'll leave that open for, Rich, did you have something? And if, I apologize, Rich. And with an increase of, 40% of enrollment, it's unrealistic to think that you can send your kids through the school, and then when your kids are no longer in school, think, well, we don't have to fund the school district anymore. It's just unrealistic for any of us. I mean, I'm just about an empty nester. Mr. Connors is an empty nester. It's unrealistic to think that the school will just run itself. You have to continuously invest in the school system, whether that's, professional space or additional teachers or paraprofessionals. And we're very cognizant, and we do pay attention to all of the residents. That's why we're very conscious of the spending. We're very conscious, and to imply otherwise is really unfair. It's a very unfair characteristic to imply that we're not conscious of every single solitary dime spent. So we do believe that this is the most effective and efficient use of capital expenditures to ensure that we're not taking any money away from the students or cutting staff. In fact, hopefully 2 or 3 years from now, when that money goes back into the operating budget, we can maybe increase staff. If our enrollment continues in those trends and we have to start cutting headcount significantly, we're going to need that extra $85,000, and I stand by that number. So I'm going to pause. Mr. Connors seems to have something to say as well. He's been the elder statesman here on the board, so he's got a little bit more history.
The simple fact of the matter remains that the building at issue is no longer, in its current condition, can't be used. It's not safe. So the people that are working there, performing whatever services they perform in, cannot do it there. It's my understanding that the township facility doesn't have the room that we need. And if they do have it, it's not used. I'm sorry. They don't have the room for the services that we need, and to the extent that they may have room, it's not usable for the intended purposes. The people who are moving up from that building to here, some of them perform very confidential tasks, which you just can't do in a conference room. So I don't think there's room here from what I've been told, and there's a weighing of pros and cons. And I think at the end of the day, long term, I believe that the building of the new construction will benefit the district in the long term. And as the president said, we have to reinvest in the facilities. You always say you got to invest into the school district. And people say, okay, teachers and other, but you have to be able to also invest in the brick and mortar. And, when you hear Pam coming up asking us, put something back in the budget, we are very conscientious of the dollars and cents. And by the way, we don't get a kickback. It's not like we're getting anything. It's a decision it's a cost-benefit analysis. So to say that we're frivolously spending money, I would disagree with that. And you come to these meetings as a lot of them, and you know that we don't. And we do we do the best we can. And, we'll agree to disagree. But no, I fully support building that structure. It's going to cost money, yes it is. There's no question about it. But I think in the long run, it will help the district, and it will also help the students, and it help the administration. So I respectfully disagree with your conclusion, and I absolutely disagree with your commentary on the board's view on taxes, because we routinely keep it as tight as we can.
I'd like to add one thing, just as testament to what Rich and Jill said. At the beginning of the public finance portion of the meeting, Dr. L'Souza had slides up that showed how much Chatham Township, the school district of the Chathams is spending per student. And out of 19 or 20 comparable school districts and neighboring school districts, we're second from the bottom. So I think the board has a responsibility to make sure there are checks and balances so that the administration and Dr. L'Souza's team are running a tight ship. But at the same time, we can look at that chart that Dr. L'Souza held up and feel pretty confident that we're not spending frivolously in the district.
Any other board comments? Okay. All right, so just as I mentioned earlier, we are breaking for executive session. I anticipate, I'm guessing 20 to 30 minutes. It may run longer depending on the conversation. Action will not be taken, and then we come back into public session just for an adjournment. So action will not be taken, so if you...
Want us to take these with us?
Yeah, Tatiana will take those. I make a motion to close the public session. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No.
I know